Board of Education regular meeting, October 10th, 2023, to order at 7 p.m. I'm going to run an audible here. I'm going to accept the motion to amend the agenda for just we'll call it agenda item 1A for a moment of silence. On Middle East, okay. You know, Dr. McKinnon is working on notice, I guess, to go out to the communities, Easton and Reading, and there's not a whole lot to say about it, but it's shocking and horrifying to many folks in town that have been affected by it. So we'll keep them in our thoughts as we go forward. I'll look for any changes to the minutes from our last meeting in September. There was one word in the administrative report by Dr. Clapp, and it was he said shout out and to Mrs. Moore and several other people, and it's when it says in there it should. So we just need to make that adjustment. Everything else is fine.
Yeah.
With that change, we'll, let's say here, otherwise we'll accept the minutes from the September meeting, and we'll move to public comment. Not seeing any members of the public, and move to board member comment. Well, I'm going to say something about somebody. No, be prepared. No, listen, John, you've been on the board for, is it 6 years now?
Just about 6
It'll be 6 years. Yeah. Thank you. Time well served. Good impact, great impact on the board, frankly. If nothing else from a technological standpoint, we're almost in the 21st century now. But thank you. It's a thankless job. You know that. You're going to go maybe to another thankless job at Region 9. We wish you well with that. But we appreciate all your effort and service here. And it didn't seem that long ago that you and Pat Keene were standing up in front of us telling us about coding at the elementary school, right? After school and what have you. So all good stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving right along, administrative reports.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I do have a short statement. The statement will be sent home later this evening. In Eastern, Reading and Region 9, we believe in fostering a global perspective of events around the world. The shocking events in Israel and Gaza over the weekend have thrust this region of the world to the forefront of our lives. We strongly condemn the Hamas attacks in Israel and the killing of innocent civilians. The ongoing violence and its connection to the protracted conflicts in the Middle East as a whole are deeply troubling and multifaceted issues that warrant thoughtful consideration and meaningful dialogue. We stand in the hope that the hand of violence will be stayed in the coming days and that the current and future generations will find peace. As a school system, we are dedicated to promoting tolerance and mutual respect among all members of our community. Our teachers support students in discussing these topics with respect, empathy, critical thinking, and a commitment to seeking balanced and well-informed perspectives. In doing so, we empower students to be informed global citizens who contribute positively to a more just and harmonious world. Some of our older students are already engaged today in dialogue that demonstrated their capacity for complex understanding and thoughtful contemplation of the ramifications of these conflicts. If we hold a place for these conversations, future generations may play a role in fostering peace and understanding in the Middle East and beyond. The events in Israel continue to unfold through news coverage and on social media, and we urge parents to consider age-appropriate discussions at home and restrict youngsters' ability to view graphic and frightening images on video and social media. We will not engage elementary age students in discussion about the events in Israel at school, although teachers will certainly answer questions in a manner that is appropriate for their age and reinforces their safety. These conversations are never easy, and we've included some resources for parents to look at in the letter that we've sent home tonight. In the coming days, we provide resources on this topic for our staff and provide you with important updates. So, with that, we have a short administrative reports tonight because primarily we're all on the main stage presenting our district and school improvement plans and our student achievement reports. So there were reports provided by both schools and by Dr. Pearson-Hugo. So if you have any questions about those reports in your packet, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, we will go on to an overview by of finances, our health report, end of year finances for last year, and our current financial picture for this year with Mrs. Scripani.
You want to put it up on the screen?
Yeah, did you?
I did.
You shared one?
I did. Thank you. So here is a financial update for our end of year to tell you where we've ended. So just to recap, this is, if you go to the next slide, this is the budget for 22-23. And if you move to the next slide, these are the things that we talked about purchasing with unexpended funds. So we did the whiteboard project, and then we did about $60,000 worth of repairs. So some gutter repairs, the hot water heater, the gym doors, the boiler repair. We've talked about all of those, but just to orient you where that is. And then if you'll move to the next slide. So when we look at education budgets, there's really 7 categories of where all those budget objects that you look at every month roll up to. So it's purchase services, the 100 and 200s. Purchase and technical services, those are all the 300s. The 400s are property. The 500s are other purchase services like transportation. We'll talk a little bit more about these in a minute. Supplies, property, and other goods and services. So looking at the budget in these 7 categories, these are the areas that are highlighted in gold where we have gone beyond the allocation in those areas. So I want to talk a little bit more about where those funds were offset from and how much is being returned to the town. Will you flip to the next slide? So when we take a look at all of the different object codes, we'll start right up at the top with our salaries and our salary lines. So as you can see in our salary expenditure lines, we have unexpended funds in those lines. And that just has to do with breakage and with the allocation of our staffing funds and things that changed over the summer and people who came and people who left. So you could see that that's one of the areas where we had unexpended funds. And then you'll also see that in our 300 series, that includes OT and BT. I point that out to you. We also had some unexpended funds in that area as well. And that includes services that for people that we bring in. So as an example, we bring in someone to help with special ed, OT, PT services. It comes out of that line there. And we were able to staff really nicely last year so that those lines were pretty flat. For our maintenance and our end of the year cleaning and repairs, that's our 400. That's where we have an overage, and that's because we made some repairs. And so the board said, allocate some funding to do some repairs at the school. And we did all of those things. And you can see that reflected right in those lines. So wherever you said, yes, we'd like to move forward with this. I wanted you to be able to kind of see the budgetary impact in these buckets. In our tuition, excess costs and transportation, there in those lines, we are about $13,000 over. In our supplies, that's books and utilities, and this is an important one right here. You'll see that we are about $117,000 to the good, and that is in part because we had a very warm winter. And so if that was, if we have a cold winter, I would anticipate that it would not look like that. But we did not need to use all of our funds that we had allocated for snow. And hopefully,
But that includes snow, like plowing, or that is just the.
that is all the utilities. So that's our heating, our gas, our, and all of the electricity that goes along with that. And then in our property code 700, that's where you see our new interactive technology. So the board allocated 275 for that, and in those lines, we actually were running a little bit of, we had some unexpended excess funds in there, and so you can see that offset there. And then last but not least, dues and fees and continuing education. There you can see that there is a little bit of unexpended funds in that line. So you can see that each one of those lines is offset. So our expenditures are obviously offset for our bottom line in those categories.
Sir.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
You know what?
Quick question.
you probably got the same thing I did.
Oh, maybe.
Oh, is there a typo?
No, I didn't notice a typo, maybe Jeff did, but is there a threshold that you're filtering against here? I'm sure that there are, we were up 200, we were down 200 elsewhere.
So these are the
It's just
actual,
the total for
this
everything.
is the total for everything.
That's
These are your actuals.
Okay,
So along the way, in the budget object summary, we talked about, do you want me to do transfers or do you want me to do an over under? And so the board, as you may recall, said, we really would like to see how much we're actually spending in these lines.
Yeah.
And so these are the actuals. This is
Every
how much
major-
money we
Yeah.
spent in all the major categories last year. So that's really what this is. 100% across the board. We spent this much money in purchase services, this much money in property. That's how much we spent.
I love seeing it this way.
Yes, very much so. In the 700 code, the number of expenditures in the handout that I got was 496,595. We've got 588 on the screen.
So the one on the screen is right, 588, 720, 80 in the 700 series.
Yeah.
And so you could see the offset for those ViewSonic boards.
Oh, because I guess that whole thing is then incorrect, because the budget was 325,000. Here it says it's 252. So just make those changes.
Yes, I can make those changes.
So the interactive whiteboards, the 275,000, that's in the 263,000.
That is the
Delta.
200, that is correct, yes. So you might ask, where did we find some efficiencies there? By looking and purchasing some of our software and technology with Reading and Region 9, where those particular purchases would come out of, we were able to really, the offset was not huge, but I do see that there's the opportunity to be able to gain some efficiencies and provide teachers with more for the same amount, which is great. So so that's just an overview of kind of where we are. And then the budget object summary that you have in your report walks you through each one of those line items so that you can see kind of how they all roll up. So as an example, if we have someone who is, who's in our 100, 200 section, if we had somebody who was out on a leave, we would notice that the substitute line would be probably increased, as you can see here, because we were having a sub, whereas the salary line would be a little bit higher. So this breaks it down into those object codes even more, but it really does roll up into those seven big categories.
So is it accurate to say this is level 2,
Yes.
right? So level 1 is what we're looking here. Now we get the level 2,
And
if you want to interrogate it down
If
to
you
level.
want
and
to
see.
take a look more,
Yep.
and then each one of them, breaks down into, we spent $3.96 on pencils or whatever it is, or $100 on.
And that's
the
all
big rocks
available
and
to see
little
online.
Yes, you can go through and take a look at all those, each piece of the budget online as well.
Great.
So if you will, does anybody have any other questions?
No, I'm ready to move that the Easton Board of Education request.
So this is, there are kind of two ways to go at this time, at this point. One of them would be to ask me to transfer the unexpended funds from those budget lines to the other large categories to zero it all out. So that's sort of option A, and then return the remaining funds to the town of Easton. That's the amount down at the bottom of the screen. The second option for you would be to ask me to leave them as they are. Obviously, still return the funds to the town of Easton, but leave the numbers in the negative and accept it as it is. And then perhaps discuss how you would like me to approach this year's numbers as well.
So remember, during the year, we normally what you do is each month you present the financial picture and the budget object summary, and you make transfers. And previously you did transfer reports, and you basically kept everything in the green
Right.
throughout the year as you went along. We talked about this in Reading and here in Region 9 as well, that maybe it's not as useful to keep transferring everything back to green, but actually to see the run rate throughout the year and to see things go into the negative and the positive, so you can actually make adjustments budget-wise.
Right.
So the thinking initially was to have that run rate play out and then get to the finish line and then transfer everything back to the green, because the previous auditor liked to see it that way. We have a new auditor now that doesn't so much worry about whether you transfer it back to the green, and you can show a positive and negative balance in each of the budget objects, the budget object areas. So you could either have this motion that brings everything back to the green and Sarah will transfer everything around, or you could simply leave it the way it is, return the money to the town, and maybe make another motion that says something like, we move to approve the end of year financial report as presented by the administration and to transfer the money back to the town. There is some useful value in seeing this kind of picture, because it's from a budgeting standpoint, you can see how you ran out the year. And if the auditor doesn't mind.
As long as the board is as long as the board is approving all of the expenditures and any overages, then the auditor is okay with that. But I want to make sure that everyone's very comfortable with that along the way.
Do you have a preference? In other words, is it easier for you to see the actuals spent and not have transfers in to zero it out, but know that we spent 62,000 on electricity at Helen Keller, even though we budgeted 90?
Do
Right.
you want to be able to see apples to apples next year when you're comparing?
Well, I have a preference during the year, how we should operate, which is what we did. We didn't transfer and we saw where we landed at the end. I felt that we should do a transfer report to bring everything back to the green rather than to have green and yellows. You see it there on the page. until the auditor said it's not necessary.
Mm.
As long as there's a record of the board approving one way or the other, then we have that backup.
I just think this is, the way you have it here is a very nice reminder of what we did, how we got there. $500,000 not spent in salaries is a gigantic amount of money. And I wouldn't want that to get lost in the sauce
Right.
2 or 3 years from now, where you go, gee, what did happen back then? So
Yeah,
my vote would be,
I agree with that, and it feels a little bit like we've been unnecessarily playing a show game with ourselves, like,
Mhm.
let's not do that.
Yeah.
And I also think to the other side, you have a positive there, but then you have a negative.
Hmm.
And you don't want to have a zero-based budget in the 700s of 500, 800,000, because you're not going to spend that next time, because you're not going to buy $250,000 worth of whiteboards.
Mhm.
So,
Well, I mean, doesn't this suggest that as the budget is built for next year, that you're adjusting, what your targets are for these, unless there's a good reason not to, unless you say, well, this was primarily a fluke and we actually need to put the same amount in next year.
well, that sort of goes back to Sarah. How would you prefer to see it when you start budgeting for?
So we are we start with 0, and we will start with 0 again. And then we will build based on requests and needs. So during the year, I think it's really helpful for me to see, I do keep track of where the over unders are, obviously, but it's helpful for me to be able to see where we're running, where we're overextending ourselves a little bit, so that then we can think about where to offset that and where we can try to look for some efficiencies. So during the year, it's very helpful to not do all those transfer reports, because then we have a much clearer picture of where we're ending up. But at this time, it really is your preference. It's, I don't mind doing it either way. We'll just transfer. We would transfer the funds from sort of the big groups to the smaller, take the larger funds, like.
And you have plenty of backup to explain, for instance, in the salary line, why we had the amount of breakage that we did.
Of course. So each one of those, I have the drill down to go behind that. So if you wanted to zero that, if you felt like you wanted to zero that out, you could. The prior auditor did say that if the Board of Ed was going to issue a bond, it would be best to have everything be zeroed out. But Easton Board of Education would not be issuing a bond issuance. So I don't know that that's very material.
Would it be used though, if we were going to bond, not the Board of Ed at any point?
No, it's all rolled into it's all run into the Easton budget. But for Region 9 did bond. And so making sure that those things were squared away for Region 9 was important to them.
Are the other districts doing it a certain way?
Reading chose to do it like this, end the year and approve the end of year financial report, which
As it
reflects, the green and the yellow there.
So they didn't zero it out.
They
No,
didn't zero it out.
they wanted to be able to see it
Yeah.
year over year.
Okay, so in the essence of making things consistent, do we?
I'll make a motion to approve the end of year financial report as presented and direct the administration to return the remaining approximate of $427,234.75 to the town of Easton.
second,
Excellent. All in favor? 6-0, very good, thank you.
if you're right.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's not fun.
Is that-
Anything else?
So on the very back page, you will see a healthcare analysis report for this year, which I tried to take all of your feedback and try to incorporate it into something that looks a little different. And so this has at the top the total budgeted amount for our healthcare for this year. And then for the budget, I don't know if this is helpful. I don't know if this is helpful or not, because honestly, it really does change it changes every month and it's really never gonna look the same. But one suggestion was that people would like to see it divided by 12, so there it is, divided by 12 months. And so if you think about it, if you think about having that amount every month, which you would not have because each month is gonna be a little different and the summer is gonna look differently than anything else, but I did break it up that way. You could see the deductions, the income and the expenses, and then just the monthly budget comparison to under over, which, I'm not sure that this provides you with a lot of information that's helpful, but I'm happy to show it a lot of different ways. It might, you tell me.
Is it possible to get a cut of it, of the, this is what it was in July of last year?
There, it's
No.
so,
Is it useful?
it's not,
Cause it's all,
It took me 2 years to understand the last one, we changed it.
I understand it now, I hate to say it, I'm regretting it because there's good information on the last, only because of the history, to John's point.
Right.
This is interesting, but I know,
It literally took me 2 years to understand.
oh my gosh.
well, so underneath is a very similar, so at the very bottom, the breakdown every month, this is much more similar to what you had in your prior report. And this does have the monthly claims, the admin fees, the contributions, the retiree contributions, the premium contributions that we put in from employees, and then any interest. So the very bottom is similar to what you had in the past.
Well, could you just attach a second sheet that just gave the history, because that's not gonna change.
Sure, absolutely.
and you
Yes.
can compare.
And then you can compare it to
Great.
that.
That'd
And
work.
right now we're in a fine place.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah.
Well, we've been under a year every month, right?
3 months.
Yeah.
We're 3 months
In a
in,
row.
3 months in, we're looking great. We have plenty of money in. Because it is September.
I do wonder if anybody has solved this problem, Westport or Weston.
Well,
or
what their healthcare
Yeah,
report
what's
was
their
like?
health corp, I mean,
It's self-insured.
We're self-insured and it's broken up between 3 districts. And so we have one policy that then breaks out, it's really 4 because central office also. So I
what's
don't.
Reading doing?
I'm not sure there are a lot of groups you could compare.
I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of
Yeah, gotcha.
comparison. It's usually just a line item that sort of says, here's so much for spending.
Well, if we could attach the history.
Okay, and then after you have a chance to take a look at it, if you have any questions or other suggestions, you can email myself in. Okay,
Thank you, Sarah.
thank you.
Who's next?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah, moving on to the.
All right, we're going. Board committee reports, is that where we're going?
That's where we can go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any committee reports? Reports of committees? Excellent. Then we will go to item 7, discussion possible action. Approval of donation from the Easton Learning Foundation.
Okay, so Dr. Clapp has some information about the Easton Learning Foundation contribution of $4,000, and we can talk a little bit about it.
Yes, the board of the Eastern Learning Foundation has approved a kind of what they're calling a final donation to the cafeteria improvement innovation center improvement project of $4,000. So Mr. Cheetah let us know that was approved. He also said we could start to use that for getting some, if there's any left over, we want to use it for maybe a patio or deck outside of the cafeteria to have some more outside dining options for the kids. So any leftover funds from that, we also approved some, and Sarah approved some funding for the cafeteria project. All those stuff has been ordered. It's 10 weeks out. A few weeks ago, Sarah, right? It was a few weeks ago. So we expect to have that in by the winter holiday, hopefully. But anyway, they were gracious in the amount of money they raised for us, and I'd like the board to consider accepting.
Make a motion that the board approve the $4,000 donation from the Easton Learning Foundation for the HK Mass Cafeteria Project.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Devin. All in favor?
Right.
Think so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, does this sort of wrap up the rendition that we saw a
Yep.
year ago or
Yep.
thereabout or more?
Those will be the final pieces will come in, and even this 4,000 will just get, once we have the last piece that we ordered at the end of the summer. Then we're gonna see that 4,000 gives me a little bit of flex if I want to add another booth or another, just to see how it all kind of, because seeing it in live and in person and in space
Right.
might mean we need another thing here or another thing there. So,
Okay.
but yeah, this will bring that vision to complete.
Terrific.
Dr. Sorry, just really quick,
Yeah, no
do we feel like we're learning anything about the way that the students are using it, about the way that it might be impacting the culture, hopefully in a positive
Yeah,
way,
Yeah.
that we can share with Reading, and we can share with Region 9, and frankly, anybody else who's interested in.
We've been about a third done, so we've only had about a third of it, and it's very popular, so that's one thing we've learned, they like the new cushy, colorful furniture. Having lots of choices for middle school kids, I think it was key, we have some, kind of countertop type seating where you can sit alone, and we do have a number of kids who choose to sit alone with a book and not sit at a table where there's supposed to be 12 people and they're sitting alone, so they don't look quite as alone. It also kind of raises a red flag a little bit, or maybe a slight caution flag for our counselors and other people to say, hey, we're gonna check in on those kids over there. Also, one thing I've learned is that no matter how many seats you put around the table, middle school kids want 5 more seats that be added because they want everybody to be included, which is a great problem to have. So, so we try to encourage them, we allow them to move some seats around as long as everybody has a spot. I remember the days we used to say 3 seats to a bench, or 3 people sitting at a bench or whatever. Now it's just like, if you want to sit together, that's great, as long as we're not excluding anybody, that's wonderful. I do think that it allows a lot of flexibility for instruction though, too, because all the tables are on wheels, really easy for the custodians to flip up the wheels, slide into, Sarah Gilly in particular used it a lot for recording, you kind of create almost like a little recording booth that she's trying to create. Some other little cool ways of using it for instruction as well. So I would say keep it flexible, keep it on wheels so things can move around easily. And then providing kids with lots of options of sitting in a group of 2, 3, or 10 is good for young adolescents. And I'm sure for older adolescents as well.
That's great, thank you.
Perhaps we could survey the students and ask them.
It wouldn't be a bad idea, actually, Mrs. Moore is looking at doing some more innovative things with the school climate committee this year, instead of just waiting on this big kind of end of the year school climate survey that we put a lot of effort into, but we don't get the results pack, and by the time we're working with the data, it's already, it's a third of the school is new and a third is gone. So doing some small focus groups throughout the year and trying to collect data in more timely fashion, I think that would be a great topic for her to bring on.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Kenan, you're up.
Good. Podium. Use a chair. There. Okay, good evening, everyone, and I apologize for my back to you. Tonight, we plan to discuss student achievement along with our district and school goals. We typically discuss student achievement in our school improvement plans in October, and we go deeper in a conversation in November into our strategic plans. Our strategic school plan can be found at er9strategicplan.org. And you'll notice, or you may recall, that even though our strategic plan is focused on 4 broad priorities, we still have metrics that we keep an eye on as part of our strategic plan. And so if you go to that website, you can see that our strategic plan identifies where we were last year, what our goal was for the end of this year, and what our target is for 2026 in terms of our student achievement scores. Presentation tonight will be divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is primarily our standardized test results. Part 2 is our DIP, which is our district improvement plan, some high impact instructional strategies. And part 3, our school leadership team will present their school improvement plans. Just want to remind everyone that student assessment is really sorted into 2 main categories: formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment occurs during student learning and can be used by the teacher to improve learning while it was taking place. And summative assessment is more the standardized category, and that is measuring student growth after an episode of learning, and that's mainly used to analyze how schools and districts are doing at the end of the year. But most importantly, formative assessment on the left-hand side is more impactful for student learning because you can actually teach when students are learning and assess how they're doing. So this slide just shows if we're looking at the different types of assessment, we want to emphasize formative assessments on the left as opposed to those accountability and grading assessments, which are more summative on the right-hand side. So in this first part, as I mentioned before, now we're going to talk about our standardized assessment results and assessment itself. The Smarter Balanced Assessment measures English language arts and mathematics. It's computer adaptive, meaning that students sit and take the assessment. It's multiple choice, and it's also there's also performance tasks. And we target grades 3 to 8 for Smarter Balance, and the next generation science standards also administered on the computer that measures grades 5, 8, and 11. So the Smarter Balanced assessments measure two main domains, as I mentioned, English language arts and mathematics. And you can see that these are the various claims for English language arts. So reading, writing, speaking and listening, research and inquiry. And mathematics, we're looking at those 4 different types of claims as well. So this is a really important slide, and it just shows that when we give you the results of a Smarter Balanced assessment, we report the percentage of students who are meeting the achievement standard or that are exceeding the achievement standard. Okay, so really that green and blue bar, the percentage of students at goal, we call it. So it's at goal and above goal. However, we do pay close attention to students who do not meet the achievement standard or who are approaching the achievement standard as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that during the presentation. So you have this slide in front of you in your handout, which may be a little bit too small to see. This is really just a reference point if you wanted to take a note on there. But this slide shows English language arts scores for Easton, Reading, and the DERG average for all students in grades 3 to 8. And the DERG average is no longer really recognized by the state, but it was used years ago to group similar districts for comparison purposes. And those districts include Darien, New Canaan, Ridgefield, Weston, Wilton, Westport, and Weston and Wilton. Did I say Wilton? Darien, New Canaan, Ridgefield, Weston, Wilton, Westport, and I've got a typo there. I've got a couple extra Westons and Wiltons.
Okay.
And Reading, right. So for the purposes of this slide, the Easton scores are in red. Reading is in gray, and the DERG average, which are the schools that I mentioned ×2 for Weston and Wilton, are there in blue. The first thing you'll notice is a decline in test results between 2020 and 2021. That reflects the scores following the COVID pandemic. From 2022 to 2023, Easton increased from 77.2% to 80.7%. Reading was flat from 73.9% to 72.3%. And the DERG average from 2022 to 2023 was also flat, hovering around 79%. So Easton increased significantly in the areas of English language arts in grades 3 to 8, from 77.2 to 80.7. This is usually the time of the presentation where I offer a cautionary tale about comparing one district to another district, because it's not always apples to apples, and different districts and different regions have different support levels, different numbers of students and so on. But I can generally say that we are well on our way to meeting our goal this year and our goal in 2026. And we're very satisfied with the achievement that we've made with our English language arts scores in grades 3 to 8.
Question,
Yes,
do you have a breakdown by grade?
I do.
I do, okay, great.
Yeah.
I didn't look ahead.
You didn't?
No,
Oh, thank you.
I didn't want to cheat.
So this slide shows our math scores for Easton, Reading, and the DERG average for all students. And note again that Easton scores are in red, Reading scores are in gray, and the Derg average is in blue. Easton scored 69.9% in 2022 and increased to 75.8% in 2023. Reading increased from 69% in 2021 to 71.5% in 2022. However, math achievement stayed flat in Reading from 2022 to 2023 at 71.3%. The Derg average increased approximately 1% from 2022 to 2023 to 77.6%. Currently, Reading is 5% below the Derg average and 4% below Reading. And in Easton, we are meeting our projected target this year and well on our way to meeting our target in 2026. If you recall, math was a big focus in our strategic plan and our budget deliberations last year. The board supported new math textbooks and curriculum at the middle school, and we also hired a K-8 math coordinator this summer. And Karen Wilson is already working with our school-based teams on formative assessments and assessing math instruction in our classrooms. And the school principals will highlight these further strategies when they talk about their student improvement plans. But overall, we are incredibly pleased with our math achievement from grades 3 to 8. And as I noted, we'll talk in a moment about how we did grade level to grade level. So this slide shows the comparison of our high need students. And when considering student achievement, the state has identified approximately 8 special subgroups. And these subgroups include special education students, English language learners, free and reduced lunch students, race, ethnicity, grade level, gender, and so on. And you can sort data by high needs and by non-high needs students. This slide compares high need students. So again, high need students are categorized English language learners, free and reduced lunch, and special education students by subject for Easton and Reading. So just to navigate you to this slide, if you look at row A, this represents high need students for Reading. Row B represents high need students for Easton. The colors in the bars represent red is below goal, yellow is approaching goal, green is meeting goal, and blue is exceeding goal. To the left of the green line, you can compare Reading ELA students A to Easton ELA students B. Reading has approximately 12% more high need students in the below the goal category than Easton, 28% to 16%. And you can see that in the different colors there. Reading is similar to Easton in the yellow and the green categories. Easton has approximately 10% more high needs students exceeding the goal. The difference isn't quite as clear when we consider math, which is to the right of that green center line. Reading has approximately 5% more high needs students below goal than Easton, and 5% more students in the approaching goal, which is the yellow category. Our internal stats also show these data. We have about 128 special education students in Reading, approximately 130 special education students in Easton. So even though we have more special education students in Easton, that is a lower percentage of our prevalence rate. Easton is climbing up to 16%, Reading is around 14%. Another category is 504 students. We have approximately 87 504 students in Reading, about 65% of 504 students who have 504 plans in Easton. That's about 7% of our population. We have 80 free and reduced lunch students in Reading and about 72 free and reduced lunch students in Easton. And so it's important to recognize when you look at scores overall, you can drill down to look at how our high needs and non-high needs students are doing in various categories, where those students are. And in a moment, we're going to talk about where those students are according to a grade level.
So just on the high needs students, did we see similar improvement and similar improvement year over year? Like, does that make sense?
I didn't disaggregate the data year over year.
Okay.
That's a snapshot of where we are. I think this is a really good data point to focus on this year. and to highlight in future years.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now we're going to turn it over to Dr. Pearson Hugo and our and Kim Fox Santoro to talk about our grade level cohorts, and Dr. Clapp to talk about the grade level cohorts at the middle school. And I think we start with Kim.
We'll be turning it over to Prince.
I'll stay a little while.
Would you?
Yeah.
So if I could just pause before talking about this, because when Randy Hicks says it's a thankless job, my mother was speaking to me. John. It's a moment I wanted to recognize, so I should have begun that way. On behalf of both current and former administrators, I do want you to know just how much we are appreciative of your support over the years. Both your work in the Easton Learning Foundation as a father, as a board member, as a chair, you have never, ever missed an opportunity to recognize us, thank us, and really focus in on the needs of the kids. Every question you've asked us has really been about what do those kids need and what are the tools and materials the teachers need to help those kids. So it is truly with complete gratitude on behalf of all administrators. We're very grateful for your service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim.
See, it is a thankful job. It is really a privilege to talk about the cohort growth in these kids. If you follow the trend line of the colors to the lower right angle, the story is really a beautiful one. So the third graders, who are the bright orange in the upper right-hand corner, this is the first time they've taken the ELA test. And 72% of those students met or exceeded the goal. But the fourth graders, who are just below, as third graders the year before, they went from 65%, they moved up to 77%, which is marvelous. So too, if you follow the fourth graders, which is that pale yellow, when they were in third grade, they went from 78% the year before when they were in fourth grade, 88%. They went down a slight bit in 86%, but in a school of our, or excuse me, a cohort of our size, we just have 100-ish kids. It could well be one student, right? But that's really so impressive. So we are so delighted to see the growth of those kids. So.
Yeah, I mean, what Kim said, both of John, thank you, John. But also, as we see the data over the years, to see that growth has been really nice, and it's been a nice point for us to focus on with the teachers and show that we are doing what we said we were going to do. You know, we set goals, we plan good instructional practices, we provide professional development, and we monitor our progress and make adjustments accordingly. And that formula is working. So we're going to keep that up, but we really like to see this trend data working. It's nice when the plan comes together, right? So it's good when you get some wins. But yeah, as Kim said, in a district our size, every kid is maybe a percentage point or more. And it's really hard when you get into these upper 80s to have a lot of growth at that point, especially when you're considering the high needs group. It takes a lot of effort to move them up a little bit too. So, these are great numbers that should be celebrated.
So that's English language art, and this is the slide from mathematics.
Look at those third graders.
Yeah, right.
So those third graders who took the math assessment this year they will have had the Envision math program their second grade year and their third grade year. They did really well. Then if you look at the pink, those fourth graders, again, 2 years, they jumped from 66% up to 78%. And then the fifth graders, 79 to 87. They dropped slightly, but the math rigor in fifth grade is a big jump. When you look at the math end of year tests, it showed the kids' unit tests were great. When you looked at their end of year tests, we stopped them at an hour because of the way the program worked. It was really quite remarkable, but we're still really proud of the kids. They did a tremendous job. We think it's a good story to tell.
Likewise with math for us, I'm keeping my eye on, but not overly concerned with the 8th grade math scores. We had 75 different 8th grade math teachers in the last 2 years, so that can impact student learning. So now that we have kind of a real stable force in Rich Crawford, I think we're going to see that's going to be a big jump next year. I'm predicting. In 7th grade, we've seen a little bit of a dip, a couple of points here and there over the last couple of years. And that's another difficult, that's a difficult age. There are some kids who are taking advanced and some kids who are just coming out of the grade level class and going into advanced classes. We're keeping an eye on that. We are doing some things this year that you'll see in our plan in terms of adding what we call tier 1+ math. So we're giving kids a little bit more time during their extended learning time with their math teacher to get caught up on that, because this again is going to be an area of focus for me personally and for the department and for all of us really. So kind of 7th to 8th grade math is something.
Thank you. Don't go too far. Yeah. Well, I was going to leave again.
So the happy story will continue as we discuss science. And the slide really gives you an idea of the 3 major domains of science. We made a conscious decision several years ago to provide a more integrated approach at the middle school level. We are implementing new materials this year, but last year at the middle school level in particular, I'll begin with grade 5. So in grade 5, you can see that our 5th graders did an outstanding job on that grade 5 NGSS test. We are celebrating their performance and are just so pleased with the hard work of our students, the hard work of our teachers, and having a well-aligned curriculum. Say in other subject areas that especially when we consider new resources, it's very important that the resources are well aligned with the standards that we prioritize, the standards that are being tested. If students are learning a great deal, but that's not what we're testing them on, then it doesn't, certainly won't receive the amount of attention it deserves. In grade 8, the success story here is truly wonderful leadership on Dr. Clapp's part to work closely with the 8th grade teacher, strong collaboration in Reading with our science technology instruction coach, Rebecca Richards. And we all look very closely at the pacing of the year and honestly needing to stay true to the curriculum. So fidelity of implementation is indeed extremely important. And when teacher gave that real focus and the students were kept on pace and really looking at their mastery of standards, look at the tremendous success. So hard work on the part of our students, but also teachers and leadership team as well.
Nice job.
Okay. So it's probably easier if I point to a couple. This is a really busy slide. And so we showed you kind of the 30,000 foot view of our scores. And we mentioned before, we give you the percent at goal. But what we do is we actually drill deeper into the standards to look at how each student is doing according to these standards. So are they below a standard? Are they approaching a standard, or do they get above a standard? And we can look at specific claims within reading and see for this particular target, which is informational text, analyzing within or across text, analyzing how information is presented, and how information across text reveals an author's purpose or point of view. So that sounds like a very specific skill. And we drill down to the skill level to see how students are doing with that particular skill. And if we notice that students aren't doing well in a particular area and it's a trend, then as Dr. Pearson, you mentioned, particularly in the area of science, Dr. Clapp met with his science team and said, what are the specific skills? What are we actually teaching? What's covered in the assessment? Are we actually covering those assessments? Are those skills? And so we do go down to we drill down to this level and look at how students are doing according to this level of detail. And then these are the four most important points when we look at student achievement. So one of the things we do is we target classroom instruction and students according to the performance level. So I mentioned these are the performance levels, right? So students that are approaching the standard, our goal is for them to get above the standard. The second thing is we pinpoint student growth, and we want to identify or anticipate when students are going to grow. So if your particular child at home, they don't get the percent at goal, but if you're a parent, you get a standard score, and your standard score in grade 3 may be 2,350, and you may not be at goal, you may be approaching goal. There's a certain amount you need to grow each year in order to get to goal by the time you reach grade 8. And this individual growth target is something that we can calculate for each child. And if you're in the green in grade 3, then your growth target is smaller each year. But if you are lower in the growth target, then you actually have more growth. So we do pinpoint student growth over time. The other thing that we do is we talked about the domain, English, language, arts, and math. Really what's most important is when you drill down to the specific skills, right? We don't teach reading, we teach a lot of specific skills under the domain of reading. And that's really important as well. And then finally, we are doing a really good job at providing students with practice opportunities. And so that is where we go into this particular tool and we actually build assessments based on students' strengths and weaknesses. So if we notice a set of skills that students are doing well, we can actually build an assessment, teach to that assessment, and then see how students are doing and then to give them feedback. So that's just some of the specific techniques we use to focus on standardized achievement.
Now, we can do that student by student.
We can do that student by student.
That's correct.
It's just a matter of kind of using some of these tools.
Yeah.
And so now we can talk a little bit about our district and school goals. So this is part 2 of the presentation. District and school goals should be focused on student achievement, and we need to determine what metrics measure student achievement the best and develop kind of goals around those metrics. Student learning won't progress unless we have really concrete, agile, precise district and school improvement plans. Just like we do in the budget, our district and school improvement plans are in Google Sheets because we want to be able to change and make adjustments. We don't put them in binders anymore. And we've tried very hard to align our district and school priorities. So a district improvement plan, which we call a DIP, is primarily driven by the superintendent and the central office team. And a school improvement plan or a SIP is driven by the leadership at each of the levels. And these goals must be focused and aligned. And that's actually an improvement by itself. If you actually align teacher goals, school goals, and district goals, then you can increase student achievement. So our district goals, this slide basically shows that we have 3 main district goals when it comes to a district improvement plan. The first is high impact instructional strategies. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. The second is student achievement, so specific goals around standardized achievement measures that we just talked about. And third, family engagement and climate, which is our school climate surveys. And so we'll talk a little bit about the areas that we decided to focus on in our school climate surveys. We touched on this last year. We like the idea of measuring impact, and that just means there are so many things to focus on in a classroom that if you don't choose a select number of high leverage activities, then you can't focus on those activities well enough for students to have coherence in those areas. So we know, according to the research, that there are certain strategies in a classroom that actually have more impact on student achievement than others. And so we want to focus on those. Right. We don't want to focus on the certain skills in a classroom that may not have a great impact on student achievement. So we talked a little bit about that last year. And we discussed this at convocation, but this is goal 1. We focused on 7 core indicators that will improve teaching and learning the most. These indicators are included in our teacher evaluation framework. So we are aligning our teacher evaluation framework to these high impact instructional strategies. And we talked about these at convocation. They include intellectual risk taking, which is the ability to create a learning environment in where students are willing to take risks and respond to questions and challenges and to feel safe learning from mistakes. Learning intentions, which is clearly setting a target and a purpose for student learning. Success criteria, which is when a teacher communicates specific, observable, and measurable criteria for student success. Providing feedback to students. If we provide individualized descriptive feedback that helps students focus on an action, then we're going to improve their learning. Strategies, tasks, and questions. Content progression level of challenge, which basically means that we are presenting skills and content in a progression that builds on rigor. We're going to make sure that we have that. And modeling and visualization, which means that students benefit from step-by-step guidance and modeling through a gradual release. And it essentially means that if we provide students with visuals and say, look at this model, we're going to show you how this model works. Watch as I complete these steps. Now you do that as well. And I'm going to watch you complete those steps. That has a really high impact on student learning. And so what we want to do with these 7 indicators, and we've done this already, we have a tool we've designed and we go into every classroom in the district, in the 3 districts, and we analyze those 7 indicators and we get data on those indicators to see how we're doing. And these data show kind of the trends in each of those buckets. So you can see intellectual risk-taking on the left-hand side, we're doing pretty well. Modeling and visualization all the way on the right-hand side, we're doing pretty well. And those areas in the middle, success criteria, learning intentions, feedback to students, these are the areas we want to focus on. And if we align professional development with these areas, then they're going to improve. So this is intellectual risk-taking, learning intention, success criteria, feedback to students, and so on. And so we're doing this as a leadership team. We're going into our classrooms and we're measuring these standards. We're having conversations with teachers about what those standards look like. We had an ed camp at the middle school just last week, talking about these individual standards. And the goal is if we increase learning in these 7 areas, we're going to increase student achievement, right? So this area here, success criteria, which basically says to students, this is how you know you're going to be successful. It looks like we need to focus on that a little bit more, but it might actually mean maybe we don't have clear learning intentions, so therefore you can't have clear success criteria. So these are our 7 core indicators that we're focusing on, and these were based on research and they're aligned with our teacher evaluation system.
I'm curious about how many walkthroughs have happened, or the percentage of classrooms that you've been able to observe, and sort of like, what's the data set behind this?
Well, that reflects 150 something data points.
Okay.
It's a 4-point Likert scale. And what that data set shows is it shows the percent of times we've gone in and we've reached a level 3 or 4 on the survey. So this is an example of the survey.
Right.
So we say our core indicator is a learning intention.
Mhm.
We go in, and when you see before that previous bar that said 52% showed that we're that particular indicator, it means the percentage of times we're in the 3 and
Yeah.
4.
Okay.
And so our goal is to increase the number of times we're in 3 and 4. We've done a district-wide walkthrough in all of the schools probably 2 weeks ago. In about another 2 weeks, we have another district-wide walkthrough. But the nice thing about this and the improvement from last year to this year is that now the schools do their own walkthroughs, and that counts, that follows up to the data set as well. So to your question about sample size, our sample size last year was going through and doing this once or 5 times, once we're building.
Yeah.
Sample time, every time we go into a classroom,
Right.
now we can collect this data.
How long are you in the classroom?
Well, there are different types of observations, and we have a whole teacher evaluation system. But for a trend walkthrough, you're in a classroom for about 12 minutes. For a traditional observation, you're in a classroom from 25 to 30 minutes.
And do you share feedback with individual teachers after, or is it just more to capture a trend?
When there's different types of feedback, when we do a type of feedback will be a more traditional type of feedback, then a teacher gets a meeting beforehand, afterwards, and they get a complete write-up. And the write-up is actually based now on those areas, right? So we're targeting those areas.
We'll plan a whole separate time to do a
Yeah.
presentation on the new evaluation system, which really features feedback. So what you're learning about right now are the trend walkthroughs from the baseline data. But we want to provide more opportunities for our teachers to receive feedback, because the more feedback they receive, and especially of the non-evaluative nature, the more that we'll see that translate to improvements in learning for our students as well.
Yeah.
So
Does this count as an informal
this does not
evaluation?
count in terms of evaluation. This is all considered non-evaluative. Yeah, this is really just baseline data so that it helps to inform the school.
We've divided our teacher evaluation system into evaluative and non-evaluative, and we're emphasizing non-evaluative areas. In other words, we're going in, we're coaching you to get better in those. And there's also the evaluative side as well. But to answer your question, do teachers get data? We can go into a classroom now and collect a certain type of data, which is called a win, right? It's basically a strength-based feedback. We rate it in a Google form and we hit submit. And before we walk out of the classroom, the teacher gets a copy of it and we give a copy of it. The evaluator gives a copy of it as well.
And that's the non-evaluative,
No, that's.
or that's evaluative.
No, that's still non-evaluative,
Non-evaluative. Okay.
So, yeah,
but that's personalized feedback as opposed to this.
Sure.
this
I mean,
data.
I would think the teachers, they value both, but I think the more repetition of the non-evaluative, I would hope would be more beneficial to them, because they don't feel,
Right.
you guys all of a sudden walk in and, oh my gosh, now I'm
yeah,
gonna.
it's risk-free and it's more focused on constructive coaching feedback.
Right.
So in short, we have a whole system around these indicators, which we're collecting data on, and that represents goal one of our district-wide plan. So goal two, essentially, we have goals around in Easton that by June 2024, 82% of students will meet or exceed goals in reading, 78% of students will meet or exceed goals in math. And for science, our district goal is simply to maintain where we are. Because as Dr. Clapp mentioned, when you get in the mid-80s, it's really hard to maintain that level. That's near the top of the derg, and we're doing really well there. So that's goal number two. Goal number three is really around family engagement and school climate. This is our final goal. And you can see here, one of the goals is by spring 2024, 90% of students will receive a report on how their child is doing in school before they receive a report card. So just communication before you get that report card. By the spring of 2024, 90% of students will be able to identify a trusted adult in their school community, in their school to whom they can reach out to. And by this should say spring of 2024, 90% of students will report that my child believes their student is believes students in their school are kind. We have this climate survey, which has over
A lot.
70 questions.
Fewer
It's
now,
given-
but many questions.
That's given every year. And my recommendation for the climate committee is actually do that survey every 2 years and to actually give smaller surveys that at the school level based on goals like this more frequently. So the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year, rather than to do these full-blown 60, 70 question surveys that we don't get back until many months later. It's better to do it this way. So that's goal number three. And as you know, we've organized our plan into a Google Doc. And the Google Sheet reflects each of the areas and our action steps. And now we're going to ask the school principals to talk a little bit about their school improvement plans, which are aligned to the district improvement plan. They have the same goal number one. They have a slightly different goal number two because it's based on their school. They have 2B, which is another goal focused on formative assessment. And they have the same goal for family engagement and climate. So Kim is going to talk a little bit about Seminole Staples.
It looks like she needs some glasses. Small.
You have it? You've got
I
it.
get a bigger.
I have it, but my star's that's tiny. So, in spite of his cautionary tale, I'm gonna draw your attention to, of all of the columns, could you look at the column that reads Gold Derg average? So you know the first column, excuse me, the first row is grade 3, They have not yet taken the Smarter Balanced assessment, but the DERG average for 2023 is 74%. So what I did is for rationale is I looked at what is the Smarter Balanced score for the grade 3 kids who have moved up to grade 4. They earned 74% out of or above. And I looked at their grade 2 end of year F&P score to see how many of kids reached the benchmark, which is a level M or N. Based on those two, I made a goal. If you now go to the left, the actual SMART goal, by June 2024, 76% of grade 3 students will meet or exceed the Smarter Balanced goal of the level 3 or 4 in ELA. So now I'm looking at the next row, which is grade 4. I want you to look again at the DERG average. The DERG average is 81%. The grade baseline score for the baseline 2023 SBA scores were 77%. So as third graders, 71% met or exceeded the Smarter Balanced. So the goal for grade 4, I moved it up by 5 percentage points. By June 2024, 76% of grade 4 students will meet or exceed the Smarter Balanced goal of 3 and 4. Then if you look at the next row, which is grade 5, again, look at the DERG A average, which is 83%. Well, look at that, we're at 86. So as fourth graders, these students earned 77%. So I moved it up 5 points. So the goal will be for grade 5, by June 2024, 82% of grade 5 students will meet or exceed the Smarter Balanced of 3 or 4. So that's sort of the formula that I used as the rationale for moving up. Okay. So then looking at math, again, I looked at the DERG average. The DERG average for grade 3 was 79%. The baseline score for our grade 3 students was 83. So we were above the DERG average. So I decided then, now remember, these kids this is math. So grade 3 would be by June 24, 79% of grade 3 students will meet or exceed the Smarter Balanced goal of 3 or 4. As grade 4 go all the way across, the DERG average was 83%. As third graders, 83% met or exceeded. So I decided to go with 88%. I just increased it by 5 points. So by June 2024, 88% of grade 4 students will meet or exceed the Smarter Balanced goal of 3 or 4. And then last row was the 5. The DERG average was 79, but our fifth graders earned 82%. As fourth graders, 78% met or exceeded. So I moved it up by 5. By June 2024, 83% of grade 5 students will meet or exceed the Smarter Balanced goal. And then the final row is science, which is just for fifth grade in our building. The DERG average was 82. Our fifth graders earned 88%. I decided to go with the DERG average, which I think is more likely. By June 24, 82% of the grade 5 students will meet or exceed the Smarter Balanced goal of 3 or 4 on the science test. So many of the areas we were above the DERG average, which I think is pretty terrific. Any questions about Smarter Balanced?
Just 2 quick things. We can go back to that slide for just a second. So, and I think I understand the reason, but so we did 83, but you're saying this next cohort of third graders will do 79. Why go down 4 points?
Not the same cohort.
It's a
I
different,
understand,
yeah.
I understand. But if our current third graders last spring did 83, why would who are currently fourth graders, but why would the new cohort of third graders go down 4 points compared to last year's third graders?
Because if you look at the DIRG average of 79, we were well above the DIRG.
Right.
I think the cohort was an exceptionally bright cohort,
Okay.
and the
Okay.
end of year math test using Envision doesn't reflect that they had as much, they didn't complete all of the units. We're still working our way through. I don't think that they're going to hit the target of 83%.
And that
It's
makes
unlikely.
sense, because it's a small cohort. And the same answer for science.
Same thing.
Okay.
That cohort, that fifth grade that's now in Helen Keller's sixth grade is an exceptionally bright group.
You know, what we have to be careful of is to, and I've been in districts that do this, is no matter what the score is, you're gonna go increase by 2, increase by 2, increase by 2. And you truly do need to look at the cohort data and to get an accurate picture of where students are. And so I appreciate that Kim looked at end of year second grade math scores and looking at, the end of year second grade math scores for Envision and looking at the DIRG averages and selecting a goal. In reality, we would love to maintain these scores because they're so strong.
They were really strong.
And I think that's the takeaway.
In so many of the areas, we were above the DIRG. I think you didn't ask for the law from my insight anyway. One of the things that I think helps Samuel Staples so much is that we have small class size. When you have small class size and you see areas of deficit, or you have more than one high need, and several of our classes have 4 or more of high needs in those different categories, teacher has the responsibility to confer with those students individually. Each teacher this, the 22-23 school year had embedded in their own professional goal, tier 1 action plans, which included record keeping once they set a goal and they met with the student on that particular goal, assessed what you call progress monitoring, brought it back. If the student met the goal, the student released and off they went. If they didn't, they continually worked on those goals. The student did not meet those goals. That student was then discussed later at our student intervention team meetings. To do that with the amount of needs in the classroom and the amount of individual conversations that are required, you can only do that when you have small classes. So again, just with gratitude that you've supported me in that request over the years. Teachers have done a wonderful job. So they deserve so much credit.
All right, let's speed this along a little bit and let's go straight to here.
So these are the action plan, let me skip. These are the action plans that we have put together for both Smarter Balanced, formative assessments, as well as the goal related to family and student engagement. The multi-tiered systems of support is the new name we have for SRBI. This is the group of professionals who come together with each classroom teacher who has students who are falling short. The classroom teacher completes a form on which she records all of the tier 1 interventions that she has tried, provides all the data that she has collected. We as a group come together and talk about goals for the children, either tier 2 or tier 3. We ask the teacher to continue her tier 1 interventions and when to return. The Smart Balanced claims and targets, as Dr. McKinnon talked about in previous slides, those teachers in 3rd, 4th, and 5th only have those opportunities to go in and look at that data. They do so in the collaboration of their coaches and look at ways in which they can work on those, strengthen those claims and those targets together. The slow development, every single teacher will select 2 instructional, high impact instructional strategies that they believe that they need to work on this year. The letter B underneath the number 3, CKLA, you've heard us talk about at last month's meeting, is the new program that we're piloting in reading, and DIBELS, which is the assessment measure that we're using in place of Fountas and Pinnell levels of literacy that we've used in years past. And Envision is the math program. There's a lot of data that teachers are using and analyzing and need to determine what are the best instructional plans going forward and setting goals for kids. Enhancing teaching feedback is absolutely an ongoing conversation. Family and student engagement is something, quite honestly, on our school climate survey, our school did actually quite well. Parents reported very positively that they do receive lots of communication from teachers, either through interim reports or parent conferences, about how their students are doing. The area in which we need to improve that I think we need to focus on was students are reporting to their child reports to the parent that kids are unkind to them. 75% said that they felt good about it, but there's still a large percentage in our view of parents who still feel they're coming home and saying that kids are being unkind to them. And it's one of those, my whole career, this has been one of those things we continually work on about using kind words and how to deal with conflict resolution using your words and not your hands. So we're going to continue to revisit that and communicate with families on our efforts to try to improve that at San Diego.
All right, I'm sorry, just a very quick question. The teachers who are identifying the two high impact instructional strategies, are you recording that? Will you have a record of that?
Yes, they have to create a slow for it. And then they have to meet mid-year to talk about their progress toward that. At the end of the year, they use a reflection in which they record what they've tried in their action plan, the 6 that they've had. And then when I go in and do observations of them, I actually look at those particular strategies because they've identified.
And then big picture, you'll be able to see, oh, hey, everybody's doing these two. We, maybe need to nudge some folks.
Actually, the trend data that Dr. McKinnon showed, the teachers now have.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay. If you look across, these is for the area 2A, which is the standardized measures that includes smarter balance and NGSS science test. We're looking to, maintain about a 3% growth. I noticed the bottom row here on the science that I was going to have 15% growth. I'm not going for 15% growth on top of an 81% already. We're looking for 84%. So we're looking for marginal gains in all the areas across the board here. Trying not to take off anything bigger than we can chew, but we still want to work on growth across the board. There's a typo there that I will be fixing as we're done here. Make sure that ends up on there. But kind of a standard across the board, we're going to be looking at where they come in with their data they came in with. One of the nice things about having middle school is they all have data when they come in. And so I can base the goals on that, and we're looking for a percentage increase. And when I get into the action steps, I'll talk about how we hope to get those 3 or greater percentage points along the way. Looking at the formative goals, those are a little trickier. We already do have some NWA baseline data for this year, so the kids come in with some data that are around. Last year we were in the 50% range on NWA, which is that math test that we give a few weeks into the school year. This year we're looking to increase that from the mid-50s to into the 60s by winter, and then hopefully those results will show up again in smarter balance at the end of the year. This is the same kind of formula we used last year. These are nice, a little bit more formal feeling tests, because we do kind of go into full testing formation. Kids who get accommodations get their accommodations. We kind of adjust the schedule, so they have a nice 90-minute block. So it feels like a big formal test, although it's not reported to the state. It's really just used for internal purposes, and we can dive down into those data. And it really does help that when we get to that mid-year part of the year, when we're in January, February, we want to know where are we in this last stretch before we go into the kind of high stakes testing part of the year. Where are we, and do we need to make any adjustments before that? So you'll see some marginal gains there. Writing is kind of the trickier one, just back to Secretary Chase on the bottom right there. And it's a little bit here because the writing pieces take a lot longer. We collaborate, social studies teachers and language arts teachers work together to do these persuasive writing prompts. They're big pieces, takes the kids a couple of use. A lot of times they use social studies content. to be able to write their persuasive essay. This is really something by the end of 8th grade, we want kids to be able to do this on their own. So you'll see the goal there is really for 75% of our 8th graders to be at or above grade level by the end of that. They start out in 5th and 6th grade with about 2 or 3% of them able to write. So we're starting at a really low number, and we really want to get to that to a vast majority of the kids by the time they're off to Barlow, being able to write that. And so for 6th and 7th graders, we're hoping that they're about half of them are able to do that by the end of the school year.
Great.
And then in math and in science, kind of similarly, we have some already some early data. We're looking for kids to, by mid-year in the formative assessments, to improve their scores on the NWA tests into the 60% range. And then we're hoping for the NWA students. They'll be using a grade level achievement test. They're using a new, they have a new interim assessment that we piloted last year called Inner Orbit. It was great to get that. Interim assessments are smaller pieces of the overall assessment, so you can kind of break them into little pieces. So you're not taking this big 3-hour test, but you can take a kind of a 15 or 20-minute kind of quiz, I guess, that'll help inform instruction. The state doesn't provide that for science, but Inner Orbit does. So that's something we piloted last year. So we want each student to be able to take at least 2 interim assessments throughout the course of the year, hopefully demonstrating about 75% of the kids demonstrating grade level achievement. So those are the 2 big formatives. And then the work in terms of the focus areas, how we're going to get there. As Jason and Stephanie mentioned, you know, we're going to continue to analyze the science curriculum and make sure that the taught curriculum is the curriculum that was intended to be taught. And I took a lot of analysis last year and looking at the science and engineering practices, the cross-cutting concepts, and the disciplinary core ideas to meet the standards. We're going to use that Inner Orbit formative assessment to see how we're doing in that throughout the year and integrate. We have a new Open SciEd curriculum. Open SciEd is a free program, but there's this great company, Carolina, that packages it all for you. So, for example, Linda Vaggi in science had the kids analyze how light affects temperature of liquids, right? Now, that's a great standard, and Open SciEd will give you that whole standards and the teaching points and everything. They don't give you any materials. They don't give you the lamps. They don't give you the water. They don't give you what are you supposed to use, the number of sticky notes you're supposed to have, all these kind of little things. So Carolina, we were able to find this company that actually provides to each standard that we want to teach to. Here's the materials that you'll need. So the teachers aren't trying to chase down popsicle sticks and sticky notes and, you know, sort of the right kind of tape to be able to do the experiments with the kids. So that's 1.3. I think that's even going to increase our proficiency in science this year. In reading and math, we are going to use our MTSS, the Multiple Support System, to identify these coaching students. And this is a new term that we started using last year. These are the kids who are the cuspy kids, who are the kids who are right just below an area with a little bit of coaching, maybe not a whole intervention where I have to pull you out of another class for 6 or 8 weeks, but we're going to bring you in and teach you about your data. We're going to show you what your data means. And we're going to show you that, hey, you're a couple of points away from maybe moving up to a level here, and then we'll get out of your hair. You know, we'll leave you alone, let you do your thing. And then sometimes that's coaching kids on how to study, how to prepare, how to the executive functioning needs that are required throughout the day in middle school and to handle all the things. We also have this plan, act, reflect coaching cycle that we're going into with students, which is a very cyclical process. The plan is reflected on what the student's reflection is. We teach the kids what actions they can do to help increase their performance, not just on tests, but in school. You know, how are they doing in school and how can we help them get there? And these can be with a counselor, like a one-on-one session, just a few times. And we actually found last year that those had a really nice improvement on how kids performed, not only on tests, but in school in general. And we're continuing to do learning walks that focus on high impact instructional strategies. We are going to be doing that with our teachers. Actually started going on learning walks and giving that non-evaluative feedback to each other, which also, on top of it, adding some more data to our whole set. It does increase that teacher efficacy, like how they really the collective efficacy. So when I go into a class, I can see, oh, wow, when I send my kids up to 7th grade, I can see what they're doing there. That gives me a lot of faith in the system, which actually is one of the highest strategies for improving overall school improvement. So I always say to the teachers, I have the benefit of seeing 35 experts work every day and they're excellent at their job. You never get to see them. So I want to get you out there into those classrooms and seeing what your peers are doing. And that'll help increase everybody's feeling of how they're doing and trust the system, trust the process. Excellent, sir. Again, getting down to the claims and targets, using those claims and targets to help drive instruction is key to the work that we're doing. Peer practice coaches are now leading workshops and coaching cycles on high impact instructional strategies, including our ed camp last week, where we had a number of teachers who were leading sessions on these cycles and on these strategies, which we know when you teach something, it actually becomes a strength, a bigger strength. So it had many benefits for that as well. And then we'll continue to work with the family and student engagement on, we've expanded the climate committee once again. We're trying to get some more small pieces of data, as Dr. McKinnon was saying earlier, where we're not waiting until the end of the year assessment and then not really able to use that data. So we're trying to, and really kind of changing the climate committee to more of an advisory board. We always thought that they have to get out there and do, they have to change. But it's really, their job is to analyze and advise the school on where can we make some changes. So that's kind of been a nice change, I think, that'll make them more effective. We also are using a book club this year, Smart But Scattered, with both the PTO as a book club and with the staff as a book club. This is all about the executive functioning demands of middle and secondary school, middle and high school, in a brain of a teenager that is anything but organized. But it doesn't mean that we can't teach to it. You know, these are areas of growth where the middle school and adolescent brain is going through a lot of changes, and we can have a huge impact on them if we have certain teaching techniques that we use in that. And we're always looking to improve our newsletter and podcast. We have some new data on that. We're up over 300 unique views a week with 5 minutes of engagement, which is like,
That's great.
it's really good.
So selling ads.
Yeah. So yeah, that covers, I think, my portion. Any questions? Yes.
A quick question. So we've talked before about sort of vertical integration of the curriculum.
Mhm.
What about vertical integration of the student learning objectives? You know, have we looked at that sort of entirety of going from elementary into the middle school and then up into the high school?
We have not looked at that. We tend to look, middle school teachers tend to look kind of at our team.
Yeah.
And a lot of the SLOs, student learning objectives, tend to be team-based because they say, hey, as a sixth grade, we're noticing we need to work on executive functioning. So we're gonna have part of our work be on executive functioning. So they're doing boot camps and things like that. Sometimes within a department, they're saying, okay, we need to work on argument writing. So we're gonna work as a language arts team or social studies team on that. Or as a department, we're wanting to bring more technology and things like that. But among the schools, that is, I think, a fight we haven't taken yet at that. I really enjoyed it last Friday. We had the ed camp with John Reed. So just bringing the both middle schools together to hear and learn from each other, that creates more kind of fibers that connect us and more chances for, hey, that's a great idea. Why don't you and I as sixth grade social studies work on this thing together? And now we can kind of see, because I only have one sixth grade social studies, he's doing it great or not. I'm comparing him to himself. But when we have a kind of across the district cohort, we can do some of that, and we get that feedback to each other. That can be more meaningful. But in terms of the vertical part, that is yet to be tackled yet. Maybe we could have someone on the Region 9 board. Thank you.
Okay. So that concludes our presentation for tonight. You heard a little bit about our student achievement. You heard about our district and school improvement plans and how they're connected to our strategic plan. And overall, you should be very pleased and proud of our teachers and of our students because we've made significant improvement from last year to this year. And I think our plans are pretty concrete and clear. We can put all of this up on our website and, let us know if you have any feedback. You have a copy of the presentation. You can send us any questions that you have.
Can you email, Dr. McKinnon, actually, can you shoot us an email with this and not that,
Put her on the.
my eyes are.
Yes.
Yeah, I can certainly give you a large version.
I just have one observation. So last year, or maybe it was in the spring, we spent time budgeting you know, we're going through a new math curriculum. All this data is fantastic. It seems like it's a year early, which is great, no complaints. But like, we sat here and we added to the math, you know, function, FTE, we added to the new programs. It's terrific. It was unexpected. I mean, it
Well,
was sort of a big gap, but it was
in K-5,
unexpected.
we adopted
K-5,
Envision.
we're on year 3 of the new math resource at the elementary level. At the middle school level, our math performance is still a bit of a dip in terms of where we would like to be. So we're confident that with a resource that is aligned across the 2 middle schools and also aligned to all the standards, we will see even more.
But it is impressive. I mean, normally there's a bit of an implementation dip when you bring in a new curriculum. And so to see, I mean, we have small cohorts. So like, again, a 10% jump is like only 10 kids, but that's remarkable to see. You just like don't see jumps of that magnitude in educational data read large almost ever. So to see that kind of growth in, you know, in a very short amount of time, still like in an COVID impacted year, like last year, actually, in many parts of the country, you saw like education at large did not do well last year because there was still like kind of this hangover from COVID disruption. So it is really amazing to see. And look, like it's there's still lots of improvement, but I just think kudos to everybody. I mean, I am very blessed to have 3 kids in our schools and just like, you know, see how joyful they are when they come home and all that, you know, just hear about their school days, but there's so much hard work that goes in to all this and like the improvement in formative assessment and interim assessments, just the thought that goes behind it. It's a lot of work. So it's just really grateful to the school leaders, the teachers, I mean, everybody just for creating a school community where kids are really excited to learn. So thank you.
2 quick questions. So, teacher response, how are the teachers responding to sort of the news that you just shared with us? I hope that they're excited about that they're seeing the sort of impact of their efforts. But also how are they responding to, you know, to the new ways that you're sort of trying to give them feedback and the 7 impactful strategies and sort of what's the word on the street amongst the teachers and how they're taking all that?
Stephanie and I gave a presentation in each of the 5 schools about the new system and why we were choosing these indicators. And Sarah did an amazing job taking ProTracks, which was our old teacher evaluation system, and essentially making a new system. It's not just that we're focusing on these 7 things. It's how we share forms, how we collect the data, how we use surveys and tools. So I think from an organizational standpoint, we're doing really well. It's still growth for the teachers. It's still a lot for them. So I'll let Kim and Steve kind of share their honest feedback on kind of the system wide and how the presentations were received by us and kind of where they are in developing their goals.
I think it's too soon to really give you a clear answer. I think that particularly for the tenure teachers, I think that they're find it just so appealing that there are informal observations and it's much less that there's more frequent visits that are focused on strengths, that there's visits that are talking about trends where grade levels and subjects aren't identified, but just these 9 indicators because they're so important and have purpose and meaning for the district. I think they find value in that, but they've not yet seen what the write-up looks like yet, so they don't yet know. I've done 2, and both teachers go, "Oh, this doesn't look like it was fast for you, Kim," and it didn't feel fast. It didn't feel fast, but I think in concept they get it and understand why shorter, more frequent feedback around these areas that are the focal points makes perfect sense.
Last year our scores weren't great. There was some flatlining and some dips, and I didn't get too concerned about it. And we're not going to chase scores. We're going to we're going to use this as information and help guide our teaching. I always say teachers' job is to help kids be the best version of themselves. And in a lot of ways, my job is to make sure the teachers are the best version of themselves. So I stayed consistent with that message and didn't kind of spike the football and say, let's light the confetti cannons off. And, we said, but instead I gave them all the data just like I did last year. So what do you think?
Yeah.
And they were excited about it. Of course, they were excited to see that things paid off. And, but at the same time, I said, is it the best version of yourself? Are you done? And so we continue to march towards what is the best version of myself as a principal and what is the best version of themselves, teachers and students. So the consistency of central office having the same prerogatives and giving the same level of consistency and transparency helps everybody see it all through. Now, I would say that at the start of the school year, new sonic boards, wonderful, but something else for the teachers to learn. We removed printers from classrooms because we want to make that a little more centralized for printing. Something else to think about, new evaluation set, and all these things, teaching is sometimes a house of cards. So we added a lot of cards to the deck this year, and so it was a little bit overwhelming at first. And I think as we settled in to the school year, and now we're kind of into that part of the year where it feels like we're doing the work that we're supposed to be doing, that those nerves have kind of settled down, and a lot of the training has really helped get everybody going. So they're cautiously optimistic, but I said, we're never going to chase scores. We're going to just try to be the best version of ourselves.
That's great. And then I hope this is quick. I'm sorry. What is the board doing that's helping? And is there anything that we should stop doing? Anything that we're like not doing? Or like, how can we help keep up this trend? How can we make sure that we're supporting you and everything that's necessary to really sort of like do that again? How do we do that?
I think you can do that by helping us stay focused on our strategic plan and our dip and step. I can tell you honestly that we developed our dip and step last year, and I can say this personally as a superintendent, I didn't get to follow up on our metrics as often as I would have liked, because we did this in October, we moved on to our strategic plan, and then I did not have my hand on the wheel as much as I would have liked, because I'm, the 3 districts, 3 boards, 3 budgets and so on, and we get into that period. But fortunately, we have such strong leaders, and I really appreciate what Steve said, that we have our district plan and our school improvement plan, and we've set the direction, and now you can pick that up and follow that course, which is really helpful. So I think we had a good year last year in terms of our strategic initiatives and our plans, and I hope to repeat that.
Thank you. Let's see, item D, I think we're on to personnel report.
Okay, personnel report. So I wanted to share this with you. This is, thank you, good night.
Good night, thank you.
This is a personnel report. It's a new concept that we're trying. And essentially what we'd like to do is share with you all of the moves that we've made in the district, from new hires to the position, new hires as to why there are some people with status changes, and the reason why some people separated from the district, whether that was a resignation or going to a different district. So this is the personnel report. You can see here, Reading is in red, Easton's in green. So you can actually see other staff members as well. This is public information, so I don't mind sharing this with you. And it kind of shows kind of who are the new people and who are the people that left. And then down the bottom, it shows whether that was a budget savings, whether it was budget neutral or a budget increase, because sometimes someone may retire and be at the top step, and we replace that person with someone with less experience, and so they're at a lower step, and so there's a savings there. You have referred to that before as breakage. This is for certified staff and non-certified staff. So here's your certified staff. You can see that there was turnover in Reading as well, less turnover in Region 9, and a little bit more turnover in Easton. So I'm going to share this with you as a view only, and you can take a look at it at your leisure.
Excellent.
And you'll be able to kind of delve into kind of the ins and outs of, and the changes for each of these positions. Having said that, I can tell you that over at Helen Keller, we lost most of our mental health team. We lost a special education teacher, a psychologist, a social worker, and both school counselors. But we've replaced those positions. And right now we're looking to fill a 0.6 psychologist. We also have Catherine Matz, our new director of special education, who started in July, mid-July. And she is taking a close look at the staff we have in Eastern Reading and Region 9, because now she oversees all districts with a supervisor in each of the districts. And she's looking at our IEPs, and an IEP is an educational plan for each kid, and looking at the staff we have in each of our districts. And remember, she inherited these IEPs and the staff that she has boots on the ground. And so one of the things she's looking at is, do our students have adequate support? Do our IEPs match staff? And I think you'll find that she's going to be making some adjustments, certainly next year, but maybe even this year, to start to meet the needs. For example, we may not have enough paraprofessionals. We need to have additional paraprofessionals to meet students' IEP needs. So over in Helen Keller, the breakage to the good was $103,000. That means people leaving, hiring people, less expensive.
Right.
Over at Samuel Staples, we had to hire three special ed teachers, a pre-K teacher, a kindergarten teacher, 0.4 PE, a grade 5 teacher, a BCBA, an occupational therapist, and some non-certified staff. In Easton, we are $28,000 to the bad. So net, in terms of breakage, right now we're at 74,300. So you'll be able to look at the personnel report and know that right now breakage is around 74,000 to the good. However, as I mentioned before, Catherine Matz is looking at hiring a 0.6 occupational therapist and a 0.6 psychologist to meet the needs of what she's currently assessing as staff that we need. And we have some open positions, which I think what Catherine reported this to you at the last meeting. There's 4 paraprofessionals over at Samuel Staples that we have to hire, a paraprofessional over at Helen Keller Middle School, and a BT or a behavioral therapist at Helen Keller Middle School as well.
Now, are these new positions or are they replacing the people that left?
They are replacing the people that left.
Okay.
And we're currently covering those needs with contractors.
And we're currently covering those needs with out of our other professional services line. So of the $74,000 that I mentioned to the good out of breakage,
Yeah.
we're probably going to have to use some of those monies to cover the agency services, because we can't not hire 4 paraprofessionals and have students not covered. So we are using contract services. Some of these positions resigned, the day before school and so on. And so that's kind of the snapshot of where we are in terms of breakage, and that's the personnel report.
The 2.6s you referred to, that Catherine, those are net new, no?
They are, the psychologist is a 0.6 plus. And what we did there was we had a 0.6 opening, and we hired Dominica Pellegrini, who was a shared position with Easton and Reading. We hired that person as a full-time over in Easton, which is good for continuity purposes, rather than to have a full-time person rather than a person that was split. And so these are additions.
I'm not following you though, but so the 0.6 that Catherine's talking about, a psychologist, or you referenced 2 positions that she's looking to add, and I took that as a net increase.
Yes, so the 2 positions that she's so far looking to add, which weren't in the budget, were the 0.6 occupational therapist and the 0.6 psychologist.
Okay.
And I think what had happened was, and we may have had a 0.4 in our budget for a psychologist, but instead we couldn't find a 0.4, so we hired a full-time person, which means we've got a 0.6 gap.
Gosh, okay.
So the
That,
difference between the 0.4, the 0.6.
so
and the
that
0.4.
person's hired, they're just as a full-time as opposed to a 0.4.
Yes,
Okay, okay. But is that still included in the 74 breakage? No. It would eat into the 74 breakage or consume most of it.
that will eat into the 74 breakage,
Okay.
along with the paras and the other contracted services that we talked about.
But the pairs are just unfilled slots that we already budgeted for, no?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, however, we are looking at, we are potentially, like I said before, we are looking at potentially adding additional support. And we are also taking a closer look at our pre-K program. So right now we have 2 full-time pre-K teachers and staff in those rooms in the 3 program and the 4. And we're looking at adding another section of pre-K with a smaller cohort. So let's say we've got 10, 12 kids in each classroom. We're looking to pull out a smaller section of kindergarten, pre-K, maybe it could be a 3-4 mix of 5 to 6 students in that class. Those students may have more intense needs. So we haven't ironed that out yet, but that's kind of, I'm showing you my hand, we're kind of looking.
Yeah, do we,
towards that.
in pre-K, do we have kids that need one-on-ones?
Yes, and in fact, we did have students start this school year from outside of our district with IEPs. And so some of those students, Catherine determined, needed additional support, and we had students moving into our district that need additional support as well. And that's playing into her analysis of what people do we need.
And
It's a
children will
double
continue
header,
to
yeah.
turn free as the year goes on
Yes.
and be added to the programs.
So I hope you find this helpful.
Thank you. For
It's
that.
kind of a summary. It's everything. And again, because it's a Google sheet, we're just going to update it every month.
Well, thank you.
Yes. I'm gonna go. Better go get everybody.
And that's the personnel report.
Okay, terrific. Item E, do we have
Yes, we do. We have good news. It's fully unanimous.
signed by the, okay, so
Unanimous. Did I hear you say unanimous?
Yes. Yeah.
That's outstanding.
So with that, I'll start and the rest of the committee can fill in. Most of the board was on the committee, but not everybody. So we started the conversations with the teachers union, the EEA, over the summer. I think we had a grand total of 3 in-person meetings, and essentially at the 3rd meeting, we reached a tentative agreement on the contract with some language. The language has been worked out over the last 10 or 12 days, and we have a new contract. And, you know, if you've been involved in these in the past, they're a challenge because you sit on the board side of the table and you want to cut the best deal you can for both. You want to cut the best deal for the town as a constituency and your teachers. And we've talked a lot in the last year or so about continuity and retention, right? Keeping our teachers in district and not losing them to the surrounding towns.
Right.
And so we knew going into this, when we looked at our salaries, and there's a book here that there's a half a dozen pages or so of schedules of what Fairfield pays or what Monroe pays or what Region 9 or Reading, all the others pay, Durgay as well as Fairfield County. And the short version is, from a Durgay standpoint, we're at the bottom of the 8 schools, 8 districts in Durgay. And frankly, that makes sense because we are the least wealthy of all the Durgay towns. So we, in theory, it makes sense economically that where we are. However, when we're near the bottom of all of Fairfield County, that doesn't necessarily feel right because we're not the poorest town in all of Fairfield County. So we had certain objectives, I think, on the board in order to recognize that, hear the teachers, and frankly, we knew we were going to make a pretty significant step in year 1 to get them to what we felt was sort of the middle of Fairfield County. We're still, if Ridgefield is sort of the bottom of Durgay, we're sort of right there. And frankly, Ridgefield is not a bad comparison from an ability to pay town or district. The highlights of the contract are, sort of on all sides. Salary, the first year is roughly a 7.5% increase, which is probably 80% of where the last 3-year contract was done for all 3 years. So it's a significant increase. Again, it sort of gets them close to where they want it to be. It's still below Reading. It's still well below Region 9. But it's sort of the middle of the pack in Fairfield County. The subsequent years are in the 4 percentile, so for an aggregate of 16% across 3 years. Most of the contracts that we've seen that have been executed in advance of ours are in that 10, 11, 12 over a 3-year contract. So we're clearly higher than those. We will have a budgetary challenge next spring, because when you look at that salary increase, it's roughly $580,000. And if you recall, last year's budget, its entire increase was about $650,000. So about 90% of our increase from last year, which was a healthy increase, is already sort of spoken for with an automatic increase in teacher salary.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, there's other things. There's healthcare where we raise some deductibles, raise the premium co-share. So we will bring back some money, we'll save some money, frankly, and put some of the burden on the teachers from a healthcare perspective. We're still not going to lower our healthcare expense. Our budgeted amount is probably where we'll come in, plus or minus a couple $100,000, and it's an 8% increase over the year past. Healthcare doesn't, it only goes one direction. It's just a cost sharing mechanism that we're working through. What else? Some of the highlights. The language, Sarah won't have to reimburse somebody $6.47 to drive from here to the high school. So we eliminated some of the things in the contract that were not significant dollars. It was more time and effort at central office. So we modified the sick bank, which is again is an administrative thing that frees up Vicky and central office and tracking all of that. It's still a function and an ability for teachers to donate if a teacher becomes ill. He or her colleagues can donate time from their sick leave to that individual teacher. And so you hopefully solve that and you lessen the burden on that individual person or family. But it alleviates the tracking of a sick bank and days going back and forth and whatever. So I think it serves both purposes quite well. I think that hits the high spots.
Yeah.
Jeff, Kevin, anything else I missed?
I'll just say, first time being on this committee, very intense. And that, I don't know what I thought I was getting into, but it was different than what I expected. But I will say, I do think, what I found at the end of the third meeting is that the teachers felt heard and respected and appreciated. And I think, on at least on my side of the table where I sat, I felt the same. And I'm not sure that's always true. I don't really know because it's my first time ever being in the room doing this. So I do think the goodwill, though, that was created is important. And, I do think our teachers work really hard. And I think it is a really challenging balance of trying to think about what the town's needs are, like what is the ability to pay, what we're going to discuss with the Board of Finance, what's going to get voted on. It's a very complex situation. And I think oftentimes people that are not in that room may forget that it's not just as simple as what we agree to in that room and at that table, right? There's a lot of other factors at play that we have to figure out. But I think that there was a lot of really good conversation and people being very respectful and listening and honoring, also the challenges on the teacher side where it's like, wow, we're looking at contracts in towns that are right there. And it's really hard for us to understand. And I think we were able to have really good conversations. And I think, that it'll lead to good conversations and discussions as we continue to move forward. And, every 3 years we have to
Do it again.
We tried to get him to go
Exactly.
forward, but.
We tried. It was a worthy effort.
But
Yeah, it's a 3-year contract.
listen, I think we will have a continuing challenge with turnover. And turnover has a hidden cost, right? The teachers will tell, the school administrators will tell you, central office. So the extent that we can reduce that to a certain extent, that helps us. It doesn't show up necessarily in the numbers, but it does help us. So I think we heard them loud and clear on those areas, and we don't want them to leave. And frankly, they don't want to leave. They want to stay here. I mean, we had most of there were 9 or 10 teachers.
Yeah.
And most of them have been with us for 10 years plus, and some 20 years plus. And so they clearly enjoy this place, and they enjoy the leadership in the buildings and in central office and the kids. And so there's a certain attraction to being in Easton. There absolutely is. Having said that, we needed to make the improvements to their salary. We eliminated our first step and we added a 17th step. It has the benefit of a starting salary being higher, obviously, if somebody coming in brand new, step one, and also smoothing out that 10-12% jump when you go from 15 to 16 in the grid. So there is some sort of economic benefit to the town by adding that step, but also you're going to attract better sort of first years, to the extent we do more in Staples probably with that higher first step. So
I think it's gonna affect our student scores too, because the more you have longevity as teachers, the better they're gonna get, the more acquainted they're gonna get with the school system. I mean, that's, I think the biggest benefit is keeping teachers happy means our kids are gonna perform because the kids are gonna be happy.
What some of you heard this from Dr. McMorrin years ago. We are still the AAA for some other, towns in and around us. That may or may not change, but you're right. But the main attraction is to keep I think, Dr. McKeown knows better, keep those 5 and 6 year and 7-year teachers, keep them from leaving. And you do that also by showing them step 16 and 17 of a 6-figure salary that's competitive with the surroundings, and that helps keep them here. So you're not training them for the first 5 years and then,
Goodbye.
wish them well. So
baseball.
Yes. Cricket. It's basically cricket.
where do you go before you go to professional rugby? In a minor league or something?
Right, minor league.
Okay. All right.
Need a motion.
Yes, need a motion. I wrote it up somewhere. Motion to approve the agreement between the Board of Education of the town of Easton and the Easton Education Association 2024-2027.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? Unanimous. Look at that.
Great, congratulations.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you to the committee.
Yes.
It's a lot of work and very much appreciate all your hard work on it.
I can tell you, when we were sitting there, the last meeting, and we were 6 hours in, we're like, we saw the light at the end of the tunnel. We weren't sure yet what it was, but we saw it and we hung around and.
I think the teachers are very pleased because, Devin, as you said, they felt heard. And I actually received a couple of emails today saying, thank you so much. We really feel like, that they're valued. And as I said at the beginning of the teacher evaluation process, and as we talked about tonight, look at the value, look at the student achievement improvements.
Yeah.
It's not automatic. It doesn't happen every year, and they work really hard.
Yeah.
I just want to thank also Vicky for helping us with the personnel report. I didn't mention that before.
Yeah, thank you. Take a motion to adjourn, unless there's any further. Want to cut anybody off, but geez, it's 9 o'clock.
I do just want to say thank you to John, because I totally forgot it's his last meeting, and that's crazy. So, yeah, he's the one that convinced me to come onto the board. So I don't know if that's good or bad for everybody else in the room, but and he did throw me into the negotiations committee and said that we would be done on time.
You're so thinking.
John, I didn't want to say anything because actually I'm hoping this isn't the last, your last commitment. But I want to thank you for your service. I actually have a gift for you, which I'll give to you at maybe a Region 9 board meeting.
Okay.
Absolutely welcome. And I will just add my 2 cents that
during sort of the unthinkable time of the pandemic, John was of particular assistance as we were creating the reopening plans. And at that time, I was wearing two hats, and both of them were really big ones, and a lot weighed very heavily on me, as I know it did on all of you. And I was so grateful, John, to your help during that time, especially.
John, you're gonna miss us.
Rock star.
You miss us a lot.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so
Thank
too.
you. Thank you for all the kind words, and the feeling is mutual for sure. And love you guys, and this has been, this has turned into one of my favorite things every month, coming to this meeting, working with all of these dedicated, having new people join and looking at the work ahead of us. Randy, your leadership has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for all you've done as chair. And I just feel so lucky to know all of you and be working with all of you. And Dr. McKinnon, full steam ahead. I think your leadership has made such a massive difference in these towns. So thank you.
Yeah. Now I'll take a motion.
Now we can adjourn.
At 9:05. Thank you.